Well, hey, it's Wes, and I have laryngitis, but I'm supposed to get this video out for the embargo date because it's an exciting day. The follow-up for the previous Viltrox Pro lenses. This is the 85 1.4 Pro. Slightly confusing, the fact that the previous two Pro lenses from Viltrox were APS-C lenses, crop sensor lenses. I have the 75 1.2. It is a brilliant lens, so I was very excited for this. I mostly have full frame cameras. How does it hold up? Is it as good as the 75? Let's find out. Starting with the build quality. First, before I get rid of it, lens hood. Nice and rigid, made of plastic. Feels a little generic. Lockdown is okay. Not the worst, not the best lens hood that Viltrox has made. The lens itself appears to be a pretty much all metal design. Feels great in the hand, but unfortunately, it is heavy. It is heavier than most 85 1.4 lenses available on Sony E-mount, except for the original GM version 1, which is heavier. We'll talk about the weights a little bit later, but feels significant in the hand. Unfortunately, the metal focus ring, when you squeeze it, it does stick down, so you have to not squeeze it too hard. You have a very nice aperture ring, sounds great. It is declickable, but I prefer a harder detent. AF/MF switches and the custom function switch. Pretty normal lens cap, and it is weather sealed. I used the 75 1.2 in a torrential downpour once for a whole wedding ceremony. So it sat out there for 40 minutes in the rain, no problem whatsoever. I have no worries about this lens because it appears to have pretty much the same design for weather sealing, that is. So for build quality, I'm gonna give this a 9.5 out of 10. Next up is handling and usability. And that's where some of our build quality comes back to bite us. Again, very heavy. Let's look at the weights of the lenses in this class. This comes in at about 800 grams. The original GM, 820. I'm used to that lens, so this didn't feel too bad to me. But the GM2 is 642. Rokinon Mark II, 509. Sea-Ray Aurora, which we'll look at closer in a second, 540. Sigma DN Art, 625. So this is heavy compared to most of the contemporary rivals. But big plus for handling usability, you have all those switches and dials that you want, and none that I don't want. What I do want, though, is to be able to lock this aperture ring. So I have occasionally knocked it out of auto. There's a little extra detent on there, but still not quite enough. One place where this does win against the Sea-Ray is generally in handling. If I hold this lens right here, you will see my fingers fit in here. And there's a nice smooth incline right here on this edge. That's okay. If I put the Sea-Ray Aurora on here, however, there is a very sharp edge right here, and it hurts after shooting for a while. And I regret that I did not mention that in the full review of the Aurora. Reason for that is I was mostly shooting that on the A7 IV. It has a little more room in the grip, but on this A9 it is painful to use. And so even on the A7 IV or the newer bodies, if you have bigger fingers, the Aurora is going to be kind of a non-starter. This will be chopping into your fingers. So, would you rather a heavier lens that has more room for your fingers, or otherwise? Another interesting issue is the clunk. When this lens is de-energized, the focus elements float freely. They kind of bounce around in there. Totally normal. It's expected. That's just a part of the design. So, just be aware of that. For video, focus breathing is very minimal. It is less than a lot of other lenses in the class, and less than the GM2, which has to use compensation. For handling and usability, it has its ups and downs. It's 8.75 out of 10. A little heavy, but it has all the accoutrement that I want. Next up is image quality. And this is where it's hard to know what to expect, because Pro used to be top of the line for Viltrox, but it's not anymore. Now it is kind of the middle. It's the G instead of the G Master. Viltrox has their Lab series. But if we compare this to the competition, we see something very interesting. I've heard some mixed things on this topic, but I found that it is almost indistinguishable from the Sea-Ray Aurora lens. very, very comparable. However, I find that the Viltrox is a little sharper toward the edges, but the C-Ray has slightly better contrast, especially when backlit. If we look closer for chromatic aberration, again, very similar performance, reasonably well controlled, significantly better than the original GM. Obviously, not as good as the GM Mark II. Wide open at f1.4, it is not razor sharp, but it is adequately sharp for a lens of this class. And again, doesn't resist flaring amazingly well, but the way that that happens is a plus for our next category. So, for image quality, we're looking at an 8.5 out of 10. Very good, but obviously not top of the market. Image character. I enjoyed this more than the C-Ray Aurora because it has very nice, warm lens flares, and it tends to lose contrast in a very pleasing way when backlit, but that can be good or bad for you. But for character, I like it. The background's never nervous, never busy, always looks very smooth. But if we nitpick, look very close at our bokeh, you will see there is onion ringing in there. Significantly more than on the GM2, a little bit more on the original GM. A similar amount, but of a different character to the C-Ray Aurora. Again, we're tightly trading blows here. We don't get the very distinctive swirl look of the Viltrox 7512, which I loved. Some people love a good swirl, some people don't. That's to each their own. But due to the nice smooth rendition, almost painterly, I have to give this an 8.5 out of 10 for image character. It doesn't have like a very distinctive, striking style like the 75 does, but I quite like it. Next up is autofocus, and this one surprised me. After hearing the clunk of the autofocus system, I was thinking, oh, this is like some old STM thing out of the late 90s. Nope, I was wrong. It focuses faster than the C-Ray, faster than the original G-Master. That's a low bar though. Very reliably, right out to the center of the frame. It does eye and face tracking, very good. It is not blazing fast. It is not anywhere near as fast as the GM Mark II or that new 50 to 150 that have near instant autofocus systems. So the bar, unfortunately, for autofocus is ridiculously high right now. I've said this before. And so it's kind of pushed everything down the line a little bit because it's insane how fast those new first-party Sony lenses are. And so I have to give this an 8.25 out of 10. Faster than its competition, but not as fast as the fastest ones in the market. Value. This lens comes out at $600 US. The original 7512, $493. So you are paying more to get full frame. However, I feel like this is a more competitive price than the 75 was because you tend to pay a lot less for APS-C lenses. So let's look at the competition. There's the Makey 8514 for $470. It's okay, not amazing lens. C-Ray Aurora, also $600, sometimes on sale for $500. Rokinon 8514 Mark II, $700. The Sigma Art lens, the new digital native for $1,200. Then you have the Sony G-Masters for $1,300 and $1,800. This is not the cheapest. And it doesn't even beat, but it matches its closest competition, the C-Ray Aurora that it trades blows with at all times. So, because it's the same price as the C-Ray Aurora, it gets the same score. That's an 8.5 out of 10. So overall, we get an 86.3%. How does that rack up? It is pretty high up on our charts. Not the highest, but it is a solid contender. And really, it makes your decision very difficult. Some people say there are too many 85 1.4 lenses on the market. I say have at it. Because it's not just apples to apples here. You're not just picking the lowest price and buying that. They all have different characters, different capabilities, different specialties. So look close at the image samples and the performance and see what works best for you, what you like the look of the most. And there will be, according to Viltrox's social media, an 8512 finally for Sony in their Lab series, their top of the line G-Master equivalent lenses. It's gonna be big, it's gonna be heavy, but it's gonna be exacting. Looking forward to that. But until next time, let's go take some photos.